Yevamos Daf Lamed Dalid wraps up the Gemara's discussion of Isser Chal al Isser. That's if something is already Isser, can another Isser fall on top of it. The Gemara has a case where there were 4 Isurim that are Chal one on top of the other. The Gemara wants to know which Tana that could be. The Gemara will try 2 different versions and have a back and forth within each one. Then the Gemara will tangentially go on to the topic of if a woman can get pregnant from her first marital relations. That'll take us to the topic of Tamar and Erva Onan and what they did and what was involved there. The Gemara will then speak about the halacha of a woman becoming tamei from marital relations. The Gemara will have a machokes as to how we darshan the psukim, who is accepted from that rule. Then the Gemara will get into the sugya of whether or not a woman can give birth after she's been divorced or separated from her husband for 10 years. And then the Gemara will talk about whether a kitana, a child, has to separate from her husband for 3 months if she had relations with another person. So let's begin the Gemara. We're in the sugya of the Brisa, which was mentioned, the Mishnah, which was mentioned, where there was one relation between a man and a woman that could bring 4 chayvei chatas, it could bring 4 isurei kares all at once, and for a total of 16 if there are 2 relations of 2 sets of people involved. The Gemara wants to know who is the author of this Mishnah. So the Mishnah said that if 2 men are each mekadesh a woman, and those women happen to be sisters, and the 2 men are brothers, then they switch wives for kiddushin. That is, they do the kiddushin, and then when it comes to the actual marital relations and the chuppah, they accidentally swap wives. So now each interaction has 4 chayvei chatas. There is eshes ish, they're each with another man's married wife. There is eshes ach, they're each with their brother's wife. There is achos isha, they're each with their wife's sister, and it's possible that they're also nida, and then you could get all 4 chayvei chatas at once. Each one gets a chatas for a total of 16. Now the Gemara wants to know who is the author of this Mishnah, because these cases, the Gemara says, as far as Isser Chal Isser is concerned, are all the 3 types of Isser Chal Isser. They are Bas Achas, Isser Kolel, and Isser Mosif. So, as we've discussed, we'll remind ourselves when we're talking about an Isser being Chal on top of another Isser, there's 3 different types of ways that could occur. So, Bas Achas is most likely that the 2 Isurim could both be Chal on top of each other, and that's if both Isurim begin at the same time. Our case here does have a case of Bas Achas, because the Isser Eshes Ach and the Isser Eshes Ish came at the same time. So when Reuven married his wife, whichever one married first, let's call him Reuven, that woman became also to Shimon in 2 ways at the same time. She was a married woman, married to somebody else, or Mekudeshes to someone else, and she also happened to be Mekudeshes to his brother. So it's both Eshes Ish and Eshes Ach at the same time. Now Isser Mosef and Isser Kol are as follows. That is, when every Isser there's 2 factors. There's the person that it's Isser. In our case, we're going to look at it from the man's perspective. So there's the man, and then there's the Maisa, or the object of Isser. In this case, that is the woman. So if the second, or in this case, the third Isser that's trying to be Chal is definitely Chal on that Maisa, on that object or action of Isser with regards to other people, that's called Isser Mosif. And that is more likely to be able to be Chal. In our case, when the Isser Nida is Chal on the wife of Reuven, it's being Chal on the wife of Reuven with regards to other people as well that were much before. That is, it's an Isser now on Reuven as well. Since the Isser Nida could be Chal on his wife with regards to Reuven, it'll also be Chal with regards to Shimon. That's a concept of Isser Mosif. Now, Isser Kolel is when you have other things being Isser in the same Shem Isser to the same person. So here we're talking about Reuven's wife's Isser to Shimon. So when Shimon marries his wife, Reuven's wife is trying to get the Isser Achos Isha being Chal on her. Now, it's the Isser Achos Isha is also going to be Chal on other people, other Maisei Isser, other objects or Maisim of Isser with regards to Shimon. So here you have in the relationship between the Isser, which is Reuven's wife, and the person, which is Shimon, the same Shem Isser could be Chal on other people with regards to the person of Shimon. That's called Isser Kolel. It's not, you don't have the same Shem Isser being Chal on the Maisa Isser, or the object of Isser, which is Reuven's wife. You have it being Chal on other ma'asim or objects with regard to the same person, in this case other sisters with regards to Hashem. So that's Isser Kol. So you have all three cases over here. So the Gemara wants to know, the Tana of this mission apparently holds of all three. Basachas, Isser Mosef, and Isser Kol. In all three cases we say Isser Chalal Isser. Who is that Tana? So the Gemara is going to try two different versions. The Gemara first wants to say that it must be Rabbi Meir. We have a brisa where Rabbi Meir holds of Isser Chalal Isser. That brisa is a case of somebody who eats one thing and ends up being chayev 4 chatois and 1 karban asham in that one action, according to the Chachamim, and Rabbi Meir adds a 5th chatos. What's the case? So that somebody who eats a piece of meat, and the piece of meat is chaylev, that's 1 Isser Kares. It's also carbon, that's the asham. It's also tamei, or he's tamei, that's another Isser Kares. It's noiser, that is, it's a carbon that's left over past its time. That's a 3rd Kares. And it is on Yom Kippur, so that's a 4th Kares. So you have 4 creases at the same time. Now Rabbi Meir says, if while he was eating, he was also walking in Rosh Hashanah, and it was Shabbos, then he's violating the Isser of carrying on Shabbos, so that's a 5th Kares. So Rashi points out that he couldn't be violating Yom Kippur for carrying, because Rabbi Meir holds that there is no Isser carrying on Yom Kippur. So you have there 5 Yisurim according to Rabbi Meir. So Rabbi Meir here, the Gemara says, is holding of all four type of all 3 types. That is Basachas, Isser Mosef, and Isser Kol. Where do you see in this case all 3 types? So it's as follows: when the piece of meat that he's eating was first born, it was only an Isser Chaylev. Then when it became Kodesh, when it became a carbon, now it got the Isser Hana on it. The same object now got an Isser Hana upon it. That is another shame Isser that's definitely chal on this piece of meat with regards to, it's in this case not other people, it's other Ivrim, and therefore it is considered to be an Isser Moisef in that regard. When it becomes nicer, the same piece of meat is now also even to Kohanim, and therefore it is also an Isser Moisef. It's also to the Mizbeach. That's another thing. So the same piece of meat is getting the same Isser. It started with Chaylev. It gets the same Isser on it of carbon as far as Hana. It also gets the same Isser Noiser on it. So that's all Isser Moisef. It also gets Isser Kailal on it. And that's when it becomes Yom Kippur. Other things are also Asr for the person to eat. Not only is this Asr to eat, but other pieces of meat, other pieces of meat which are kosher are also Asr to eat because of Yom Kippur. So that's an Isser Kola. Now, according to Rabbi Meir, it's also Shabbos. Shabbos and Yom Kippur are Basachas. They both begin at the same time. The two of them begin at sundown, so those two are Basachas. So here you see Rabbi Meir holding of Isser Mosef, Isser Kola, and Isser Basachas, and therefore he holds of all of them. So this is the Gemara's first approach. That Rabbi Meir is the Tana who holds of all 3, Isser Mosef, Isser Kola, and Basachas. The Gemara's Akasha, though, that how could this be Rabbi Meir? If it's Rabbi Meir, which one of his Rebbeim is he following? Is it the opinion of Rabbi Shua or the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer? What's that about? That's about the fact that in our case, the person who was marrying, he was doing chuppah here, I thought he was doing a mitzvah. He was mistaken. He was doing an Isser Kares. He was doing 4 Isur Kares, but he thought he was doing a mitzvah. Now, the opinion of Rabbi Shua is that if somebody's trying to do a mitzvah and he's accidentally doing an Isur Kares, he doesn't have to bring a carbon chatas. That doesn't really fit here because in this case we're saying he gets 4 chatas, even though he thought he was doing a mitzvah of marrying his wife. So the Gemara says, okay, so who's Rabbi Meir holding? Right? So either he's going like Rabbi Eliezer, who says you are chayv chatas even if you thought you were doing a mitzvah, or it could even fit into Rabbi Shua. Rabbi Shua only says that as far as the case of a bris milah. Somebody was doing a bris milah on Shabbos and he mixed up 2 babies, and he did one whose time wasn't supposed to be on Shabbos, it was supposed to be on Sunday, and therefore he's chayiv. He did a Isser Chilul Shabbos because Mila is only mutter to do on Shabbos when it is the 8th day. In this case, it was not the 8th day because he mixed up the baby. So maybe Rabbi Shua, who says over there in that case that he's patur because he thought he was doing a mitzvah, only says it in the case because there's a time limit, and therefore he was in a rush and he got confused. But in our case, he could have married this woman at any time. There was no rush, and therefore he should not have rushed and got confused, and therefore he's responsible for it, and he does have to bring a carbon chatas. So Gemara says the problem is that we see that Rabbi Yeshua says that a person doesn't have to bring a korban chatas when he thinks he's doing a mitzvah, even if there's no rush and there's no time limit, because he says in the case of Truma, somebody who thought that he was a Kohen, turns out he was a Ben Grusha, Ben Chalutza, and therefore he's not a Kohen, and he was eating Truma. So he accidentally did an Isser of eating Truma, so he has to bring a korban chatas now. There was no rush. There's no deadline, so what's the problem? The Gemara says, no, I could say there that the case was also when there was a deadline, that it was Erev Pesach, and he was rushing to finish it, because it was Chametz, he was rushing to finish it up before the Zman Isser Achila. Okay, so this is all saying that this Mishnah is Rabbi Meir. Now the Gemara says, maybe I'll tell you the Mishnah is somebody else. Maybe the reason you have all 4 chatos at once is really it's not Rabbi Meir, and it's not Isser Moisef and Isser Koil, it's all Isser Basachas. That is, we'll come up with a case that the 4 Isurim, Eishes Ish, Eishes Ach, Achos, Isha, and Nida, are all Chal at once. How is that possible? So the Gemara says, well, Eishes Ish and Eishes Ach are always going to be Chal at once, because they happen as soon as Reuven's Mekadesh in Isha. Achos Isha being Chal at the same time could be, and both men made a Shliach to bring Kiddushin, and both women made a Shliach to receive Kiddushin, and the two Shluchim met each other and gave the Kiddushin at once, and that one action was a Kiddushin for both men to both women, therefore both marriages happened at once. So therefore, the Isser Achos Isha and the Isser Zach were both Chal at the same time, and the Isher Isha, of course, is Chal at the same time as well. The Gemara says, though, but it's unlikely that she became a Nida in that exact instant, so how do you have the Isser Nida Chal at the same time? The Gemara says, okay, I'll tell you that the case is that she became a Bas Mitzvah, and he became Bar Mitzvah in the very same day, and therefore all 3 Yisurim existed at once. It means to say as follows: she was a Nida, they already had Kiddushin, and they were all Kitanos. They were all Kitanim and Kitanos. Now, when was the Kiddushin Chal? Rashi says that the Kiddushin was given al Tanai to be Chal on the day that they become Bar and Bas Mitzvah. That's what had happened. Now, they both became Bar and Bas Mitzvah at the same instant, because they became Bar or Bas Mitzvah when the day dawned after their birthday and their 13th and 12th. And it was the same day. And therefore, the dawn of the next day, the Kiddushin for both of them was Chal, and also her Isser Nida was Chal, because she became 12 and he became 13, which is the age of Chiyuvei Mitzvos. So that's how we could have the case, and it all works out to be Bevasachas. Okay, now the Gemara is the Kasha, that in all these cases, we said in the Mishnah that we have to separate them from 3 months before they each go back to the proper husband, before each woman can return to her correct husband, because we want to make sure that she's not pregnant. So the Gemara says, what do you mean? Don't we have a rule that Rav Nachman said, in the name of Rabbi Bar Avua, that a woman cannot become pregnant from her first marital relations, possibly, most likely, because of the blood that's mixed in, because she's a Besula. So the Gemara says, we'll tell you that they did more than one bia. She couldn't become pregnant from the first bia. She became pregnant from the second bia. That's what we're afraid of. The Gemara says did more than one bia, so then it's wrong to say that there are 16 chatais. There are 32 chatais. Each different bia is a separate set of all 4 chatais. So the Gemara says, okay, so then what do you want to say? You get a separate bia for each chatas. You should list all those chatais. You get a separate chatas for each bia, that is, and you should list all the chatais. What are you going to say according to the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer, who we said is possibly Rabbi Meir? There was the author of the Mishnah going to the Shita of Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer holds that there's a separate chiyuv chatas for each separate thrust that's involved in the bia. So there are many, many, many chatais. So it's incorrect to say that there are 16 or 32. So what it means is that when the Mishnah was listing the number of chatas, it was talking about for the first maisa, whether it's the first bia, first thrust, whatever it is. So that's what it was referring to. But yes, there could be many, many different chatais, and therefore they could be pregnant from later bias. Now the Gemara goes deeper into the statement of Rav Nachman that a woman doesn't become pregnant from the first bia. So the Gemara says what happened with Tamar. Tamar, who was married to Yehuda's sons Er and Onan. Er died, Onan died, and then she played a trick on Yehuda so that he would be together with her. When she became pregnant from that, how did she become pregnant from that first bia? The Gemara says that she had already opened her hymen. She had ripped her basulim with her finger. The Gemara says you can see that because all the women in Rebbe's house who did that were called Tamar because that's what Tamar did, and therefore they were all given the name Tamar. Gemara asks, what do you mean that it was her Bia Rishona? It wasn't Bia Rishona. She was married to Aaron Onan. Gemara says, no, Aaron and Onan did not do a normal Bia in the correct place. They did a Bia in a different orifice in the woman's body. So the Gemara says, that's not correct either because we have a Mishnah where it says that somebody who is afraid to get his wife pregnant and therefore he doesn't do a real bia, he does not spill his seed within her, he thrusts within and then he pulls out before he releases, and therefore he's spilling his seed outside her. That is a machlokas Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim if that's permitted. Rabbi Eliezer said as long as he's doing it in order to save his wife from becoming pregnant and losing her milk and therefore killing his child, that's mutter. Chachamim say that's Maisa Aaron Einan. So you see that Aaron Einan did a real bia in the right place, because here it's being described as Maisa Aaron Einan when he did a bia in the right place, but he spilled the seed outside. So Gemara says, no, it's similar in some way to Erev Einan. Erev Einan did that as well. They also spilled their seed outside, but they did be in the wrong place and not in the right place. So Gemara says, how do you know that Erev and Onan spilled their seed outside? So about Onan, it says explicitly that that's what he did. The reason he did that is described in the Psukim explicitly because he was afraid to impregnate. He didn't want to give his seed to his brother. He knew that if there was a child that was born, it would be considered his brother's child because of Yibum, and therefore he spilled the seed outside. Now, first of all, how do you know that that's what he did? And second of all, why would he do that? So the Gemara says, you know that did that because it says Yevamos Gamhu about Onan, that Onan knew that did the same thing, and therefore must have also done the same thing. And the reason he did it, even though he wouldn't have his child be belonging to his brother, the reason he did it is because he didn't want to impregnate a Tamar, because he didn't want to mess up her beauty. Okay. Now the Gemara goes into a similar but related sugya, and that is the sugya of a woman becoming tamei from a marital relations. There is a pasuk that says that she does. The pasuk says, "V'isha sheyishkav ish osa." A woman that man will lie with her shichvas zara. It's a key word. V'rachatzu b'mayim v'tamad arv. So both of them become tamei until the end of the day. So they have to go to the mikveh and have the sun go down. Now, it describes this tumah as being because of shichvas zera. That implies that it's a correct place of bia. It's a makom zera, a place where they're supposed to go. And it also sounds like it's a bia which could have zera, a bia which could give offspring. Another thing is that the pasuk says osa, she. That's a limiting word. She becomes tamei to somebody else who does not become tamei. So what is excluded from osa? So what it says is machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim. Rabbi Yehuda says that a kala in her first bia does not become tamei. Chachamim say that a woman who had intercourse through a different orifice does not become tamei, because that's not the place of zera, but that's excluded from the word osa, not from the word shechlas zera. So the Gemara says, what's the reasoning behind either of them? So the Gemara says, it sounds like Rabbi Yehuda says that a kala doesn't become tamei because the Torah is worried about her makeup getting messed up. How could that be? So Gemara says, no, that's not what they're arguing about. They're arguing about what is meant by the term shechvas zera. Rabbi Yehuda holds that shechvas zera includes any type of bia which cannot give birth, which is not called that is, when we say shechvas zera, that's what is metame. It's only a bia that qualifies as a zera, and that's only something which is a full penetration with a release, not a partial, not what's called hara. This is machlokes how deep that refers to, but either way it's excluded from shechvas zera because there's no zera release. It also excludes shelo kitarka, that's if it's in the wrong orifice. Now, both of those don't qualify as zera, and therefore Rabbi Yehuda says the word osa must be something else, and that's referring to a kala. And a kala, because she can't give birth from her first intercourse, therefore it doesn't count as shechvas zera, but that is a separate word that excludes that. Now, Chachamim say hara and shelo kitarka, one is learned from shechvas zera and one is learned from osa. And therefore, there's no pasuk left to exclude a kala from this. Okay, the Gemara goes further. The Gemara says that Rav says in the name of Rav Yochanan, any woman who is separated from her husband by his death, divorce, whatever it is, for 10 years, she can no longer give birth. Her system shuts down, and even if she gets married again, she can't have kids. Says Rav Nachman, that's only if she did not intend to get married throughout those 10 years. If she was planning on marrying anyway, then the system stays awake. So the Gemara says that Rava said to his wife, who was the daughter of Rav Chizda, that the Rabbanan are surprised that you are having children. Rava's wife was the daughter of Rav Chizda, but she was married to Rami Bar Chama 10 years before she married him. She was not married to anyone for 10 years, and therefore it's surprising. It goes against this teaching of the Chachamim. So the Gemara says that she said, I was planning on marrying you all 10 years, and therefore it doesn't go against it at all. Now the Gemara says that a woman came before Rav Yosef, and she said, I waited 10 years from my husband until my second husband, and I gave birth. So he said, my daughter, do not be motzid laz, don't create slander against the words of the Chachamim. So she said, you're right, I was nival to a nachri during that time. Okay, another Gemara goes into a different sugya, and that's that we saw in our Mishnah that if the women who were involved in this switched marriage were ketanos, they don't have to wait the 3-month waiting period to make sure they're not pregnant, and that's because ketanos, children, cannot become pregnant. So Gemara says there's a possibility though that we would make a gzeira because you can make a mistake. We want to make a general rule. So Gemara says that Shmuel says there's no gzeira except for Ketanos Yisrael. That's to say as follows: when a woman is megayer or meshuchor or an eved who's freed, that is, she doesn't have to wait 3 months to make sure that she wasn't pregnant before the giyur and the shechor. Normally you would say that she would have to, because if she was pregnant, then we need to know that that child is not Jewish, and it has to be megayer separately because she became pregnant with it before she was megayer. So that's true unless she's unless she's a ketana, we don't have that concern. The implication, though, is that for Yisrael ketana, we do have to make her wait 3 months. Now, what case are we talking about when we say that Yisrael ketana has to wait 3 months? If you're talking about where she was married to somebody and she did mian from him, so there's no gzeira. That can't be the case. And the simple reason is that a gedola can't do mian, so you won't get mixed up between a ketana doing mian and a gedola doing mian. The only possible reason to say that a ketana has to wait 3 months is gzeira, that if you let a ketana get married right away, a gedola will get married right away. In the case of mian, there's no gzeira because a gedola can't do mian. So therefore that can't be what it's referring to. Now maybe it's referring to where she got divorced from her first husband and she has to wait 3 months. That can't be the case either, because Shmuel already taught us that halacha one time. He said so explicitly. So what's he referring to here? It says it must be referring to where she was mezana, that is, she had an adulterous relationship, and now she has to wait 3 months before going back to her husband. Obviously, it was an accidental adulterous relationship, or it was an ones, and therefore, all ketanas are considered to be an ones, and therefore it's referring to exactly our case in the Mishnah, which was an accidental adulterous relationship, in which case Shmuel is going against the Mishnah, because the Mishnah said that ketanos don't have to wait, and Shmuel said that they do have to wait. So the Gemara says this is not a problem. In the case of ketanos here, this is a rare incident. There's no gzeira d'Rabbanan. Such a case can't happen with the switching of the wives. It's very unlikely, and therefore it's considered like a haros shah, and therefore we don't have a problem with it. Now the Gemara has another version of the whole Gemara, which we'll get to on the next daf.